Well, good morning, everyone. Darren Doherty speaking. Hope you're all well. I'm just going to close this door just so that I don't wake my wife up, who is normally up at this time of day. She's 7 a.m. Her and I are both early risers. But, we had a bit of a late night last night. Went and watched Billy Bragg, the quite famous, well, I would say he used to be left wing, now sort of centre left, as he's got to be 61. Musician in an orator, an activist, you might say, in Castlemaine at the theatre that our eldest daughter manages. So we got home at 2:30 this morning, and it's so we're a bit crusty, but I've been up for a while. Got my cup of tea, got my toast. Life's good. So very grateful for being able to go and see that performance with our kids and some good friends, and on a very hot night with 500 other people jammed into a rural theatre. So that was a lot of fun, and he gave an incredibly generous and I would say masterful performance in oratory. It was pretty. I mean, I don't agree with everything that he has to say, which is usual, but with anyone really. But it was really interesting to see a person at the top of their game and to have reached a point of mastery, not only as a musician but also as a communicator. So yeah, it was. And then we got to have a chat later on, which was really cool. So he liked the idea of the film, and he's reading Black Emu, which is quite interesting. But anyway, Dark Emu, I should say, by Bruce Pascoe. So yeah, cool. Anyway, so if I'm a bit bleary-eyed, then that's the reason why I went out and tapped my feet for a while. So let's, without further ado, let's kick on with things, and let's hear what you've got to ask in terms of questions. So we've got Andy, Ben, Colin, Garth, Jason, Pablo, Samantha and Ray with us this morning. So you know the drill. Tap on your little hand there, wherever that thing is at your end, and let's have a chat and see where we're up to with things. I'm putting bets on who I think will go first, but I'll keep my bets to myself. We're already revealing the usual candidates, and there's one. So good morning, Pablo. There we go. Okay, Pablo, whenever your sound will come on in a moment, I hope. So just keep trying there, mate. Okay, I can't see anything from Pablo. We have a question regarding our map. Yes, I'm sure you do. All right. Well, until I can hear your voice, mate, we might have to do this some other way. So, yeah. There we are. I'm just getting you now. Yeah. Hello. No, I can't hear a thing, mate. You sound like a robot deep under the Pacific, in the Marianas Trench, actually. No, I can't hear you. Sorry, mate. I can hear you, but you're not legible, so I can't understand a word that you're saying. So maybe just maybe restart your computer and come back in and see how that works to sort out your sound issues. Because yeah, and once you do that, then I can I'll get your map up and we'll have a look at it and see what's going on. Okay, thanks, mate. Okay, who else have we got there? Who wants to check in? Ben, okay.
Hello.
Hey, how are you, mate?
Good. How are you?
Good. Very well. Very, very well. Yes.
On
No,
about on
I
about
had
sleep.
huh?
You're on about 3 hours sleep, I take it.
Yeah, no, that's all. That's all good. That's all good. I've had my training in my life on that sort of side of things. No, but I was pretty buoyed by the fact that I was able to take the lady down for a drive last night, and that's not just the lady sitting next to me. So,
Yeah, I understand.
especially after pulling her apart and putting her back together, and she burbled along very nicely. And
Very nice.
I ended up taking the musician that played with Billy Bragg last night. He came out and he's a bit of a car nut, and he said, "Oh, can I? I love that car. I've got a Triumph, an Englishman." And he said, "Oh, can I go for a drive with you?" And I said, "You can drive." And he was just over the moon. So yeah, we had a little anyway.
Sounds
All
fantastic.
good. Sorry, everyone. That's probably our Ben and I are both. I think we're both what you might call petrol heads with a penchant for Datsuns. So we'll leave
Yeah.
it. Sorry. So subsoiling,
Yeah.
diesel.
Like you read a lot, and I know that you've mentioned it to people who raise the question when they're sort of ploughing headfirst into trying to keyline plough their properties.
Mm.
Um, What I'm sort of more looking at like the back of the envelope calculations on the sorts of things you'd consider,
Hmm.
soil types, intended use, whether it's grazing or orchard or whatever, slope, um, those sorts of things that you would put into or try and quantify to work out whether
Yeah,
subsoil.
as a sort of a mental summary, if you like.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um,
I know it's
well,
probably
the first thing is, look, I mean, if you haven't, if you, yeah, so if you, well, your question's around return on investment in your
yeah.
there, so that's where it starts for me. But well, I'll put it two ways, and our discussion on cars is a very good example of this. Most of us on this call are comparatively, as far as the world goes, we're comparatively wealthy people with choices, right?
Mm,
That's you might say that's one of the definitions of wealth is the volume of choices that you have, and so a lot of us will express that through our use of discretionary income, and so you and I are. We have some of our discretionary income goes into our love of particular vehicles and other things. And some of that, I think, and this is a very strong point as far as context is concerned. Uh, Sometimes we will spend money on things that, like in the scheme of things, don't really matter, and that might be our, doing up our cars or cars for that matter. So when I look at I go to some properties and people say, "Oh, I can't do this because I can't afford it," and yet they're driving around in $120,000 brand new Land Cruiser, and it's
mm,
like, sorry, you don't need to drive 100. You don't have to. You don't have to have $120,000 Land Cruiser, mate.
yeah.
So so people haven't had the introspection on this to sort of predetermine uh, that discretion can go in a lot of ways. And why I'm saying this is because when one looks at subsoiling as something to do, it's kind of like that Land Cruiser in a way. It makes you feel good,
Mm,
and it can make your land feel good too, because it can do things like you can immediately have your land infiltrate water, and you can see the bounce in it. Can you see it at the till in the accounts? Not well. You can see it because you can see the spend, but you
mm.
can't necessarily, at least in a short term, see the bounce. Now that's not always the case. Sometimes I've seen it to be, but it's really unpredictable because it's dependent on climate. it's dependent on so many different variables as to whether it's worthwhile. Now, if I was doing subsoiling as part of a program for making a soil more readier, if that's a word, for planting trees, as you are, then that's a no-brainer. That's because it's the typical part of the pathway of getting a soil ready for perennial tree crops. I think that's very well established. Yeah. And it's a relatively small cost in the scheme of things. I mean, the individual trees and irrigation and planting those trees are usually the biggest proportional costs out of that whole thing. The ground preparation, surveying, etc., relatively small. I'd add to that for soil amendments, adding any lime or fertilizers, all of that sort of stuff. So that's, so you look at those as being a big four costs. So it's not really that much. But if you're doing it for pasture improvement, then that's a whole nother ball game. And I look at it in two ways, therefore, that one will look at it as being something that's good to do and generally is effective, but I would sort of generally put it in the discretionary spending basket. It's sort of halfway there, you know what I mean? Because there's clearly eco or land function benefits, but the return on financial investment is not necessarily there. So you might have to broaden your definition of what return on investment is. Therefore, yeah, and I suppose that's where ultimately we get to. And test areas is something that I've had a number of people who've in the workplace, as you will have noticed, have said, I want to do keyline and blah 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 blah. And I said, well, why don't you go and test it? Test the cost, blah, blah, blah. Especially if your context is very financial, or especially if you're running off a fairly low base financially, then you can't afford to be really frivolous. And that's where wire and water and grazing, that sort of approach tends to be a lot more cost effective.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So you're looking at it, well, because you're going to be doing a tree thing. So for that, that's a no-brainer.
And I think given that we've got quite a clayey sort of soil and we've got top subsoil that comes almost right up to the surface.
Oh, well, I think we've talked about this before. Where you are, it will have been a forest.
Yeah.
The indigenous people prior to Europeans coming would have managed patches of maybe open woodland, but you can't sort of overcome the climate. It's a non-brittle climate. Non-brittle climates just want to be forests. So so therefore they create a soil which is a forest soil, and forest soils are shallow. There's a great book I should recommend on this, and I'll recommend it when we do the soils section anyway. It's called Vegetation and Soils. I thought it was written by S.J. Eyre. Just pop it up on the screen here. Vegetation and Soils. Yeah, this was a world picture. This was written by, I think he was a science teacher in the UK, and it is here. And it's a really good book because, or from my perspective, it's not a good one. Let's go back to a cover. That's the one I've got. This one here. Good old Amazon. So it's a really good piece because what it does is it describes the difference. Well, it describes the relationship between the vegetation. Well, it describes the effect that a vegetation community has on a soil. And that's super instructive to help in terms of helping you understand that if you direct particular, because that's what we can do, if you take your soil through a specific relationship with specific vegetation communities, then you will create a soil that will have a particular set of characteristics. And so where we go with that is, if you've got a really shallow soil, because we understand quite clearly, and once I say this, you'll appreciate it. You'll understand very clearly the difference between the soils of the world that have been developed under grasslands, the soils that have been developed under wetlands, and the soil that have been developed under forest, under full forest canopy. And they all are very, very different. They have very different characteristics as a result of the vegetation communities that reside upon them. And so this was really brought home to me. We did a project, we did a REX in Chile at Javiera Carrion's family property with Griffin Hope, her partner, in 2016. Their property is at the base of a mountain in the Andes. And on the side of the mountain, on the side of the Cordillera there, as they call it, there's a natural lake. And the natural lake is made of rock dust. The embankment's made of rock dust, ground up, glaciated volcanic rock. Anyway, it's really fine in texture, but it's still sand. It hasn't got to the point of clay. And that about every 1,000 years or so, that the embankment on that lake high up in the hills, it breaches, and there's a flood event where the water comes down and mixed with heavily mixed with all of this rock dust, and then it settles out over the plain below. And so they've got this, so where their farm is, they've got a couple of hundred hectares. It is completely the same. It's a homogeneous material. Like there's no variation at all. And it gets replenished, in geological terms, relatively frequently. So where I'm getting to is that you've got, as a starting point, a soil which is, there's no variation to. You could say it's like a control. Whereas the soils where you are, you'll go from spot to spot, and there hasn't been any replenishment of that order for, probably 50s or hundreds of million years, right? Mm. So anyway, plus lots of tectonic forces and blah blah, right? Anyway, at Griffin's and Javiera's, there was within about 500 meters, there was 4 squares that were right next to each other. So you can imagine a 1 kilometer square. No, it wouldn't have been that much. A 500 meter square, and there were 4 different vegetation communities in a box. Right, one was Eucalyptus globulus, one was Pinus radiata, one was a perennial grassland, and one was an oak forest. Oak with what do you call it, blackberry underneath, right? So it had these 4 cool to warm temperate ecosystems, or complexes of vegetation complexes. Anyway, on the soils day of the REX, we went under, because I saw this and I went, oh, this is just perfect lesson, so, and I was really intrigued myself, having read this book a decade or so before. Anyway, so we go to each of these complexes, and we go into the middle of them, and we take shovels and dig, and everyone's digging, and everyone's taking notes on what the soil characteristics are. And it was profound, because you could see the absolute difference that on this soil, which had no variation, was, geologically incredibly young when it was a pup, basically a sandbox of volcanic sand, and the changes those vegetation complexes had made to that was profound. And what it really did was said, wow, if you want to improve a soil so it becomes a so-called agrisol, then which is an agricultural soil of high organic matter, good internal drainage characteristics, all the stuff that one would identify as being a good agricultural soil, will then plant a grassland on top of it. Because do that, and then you get depth, because we could all see that the soil that had the grassland on it, the pasture on it, had by far the best depth. The soil structure was by far the best, and so on and so forth. And then the second one, well, I'll ask you, which one do you think of the other three had the next best soil?
Maybe the pine?
No.
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 You had savanna, you had eucalypt, oak, pine, and grassland. Is that right?
Yep.
Well, the eucalypt's probably the fastest out of those. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the oaks.
Yeah, right. Well, they're the lowest
Well,
growing trees, though, out of that lot, aren't they?
no, it's not about it's not about that. It's about the effect that we're getting to here is that it really, there's another piece that was written by the CSIRO years ago. It was called The Soil Amending Effects of Different Trees. Now, it was a lowly published little paper. Anyway, some scientists went around Australia and did soil analyses under different tree communities that were next to pastoral and cropping areas. And so they went under different eucalypts, they went under different exotics and whatnot, and they checked out the soils and the control and under these trees. And they found that oak trees in particular, and there's a couple of, and ash, I think, fraxinus, cycled calcium. That was their predilection, which is interesting because in biodynamics, oak bark is used for its association with calcium. And of course, when you understand the effect of calcium in soils, which I think I talked about the other day in relationship with the relationship between magnesium and calcium and soil dispersivity, that when you get more available calcium, which is what a soil test is revealing, it's available minerals, then you tend to have better soil structure and better soil fertility, because calcium is like this gateway drug for the soil in terms of soil structure and soil mineral availability. It's a very powerful element. And so when you look at soils under oak trees and you look at soils under blackberries, which the analog in your area would be lantana. So you go and look under it. I mean, for all of the ills of both of those species, go and look at the soils underneath them, and you go.
Oh, you can stick your arm down in the soil where there's lantana.
Exactly, right. And so you sort of go, wow, I wouldn't mind getting a lantana bock. I just need to get rid of the lantana, and it's done an amazing job. So this is where I'm going with this. You know, if you're looking at the pathways to getting your soil ready or in a better state for your macadamias or whatever else is to follow, you need to take it through a succession. Part of that will be using something like a keyline plow, which is a very physical, well, you know, it's a machine, you know, so you're dragging dragging a bit of steel which is shaped in a particular way through the ground for a particular purpose. Right, now, what biology are you going to team up with to take it, to really get it fertile? It's just an enabler. I mean, it basically just removes compaction and provides a lot more airspace in the soil. So the next step after that is what you do next, and that's the same with anything. So I suppose that's where I'm getting to here in this rave, is that you should be considering where you want to go with things, in order for you to then, you've got to know what you want. So if you've got soils which are perhaps have poor internal drainage characteristics, but they're not in an area where poor drainage should be a problem, like you're on a slope and all that sort of stuff, poor drainage shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, you might have clay soils. Yeah, they might be old forest soils. They're subsoils, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't mean that you can't convert them into something else, because you can. And that's what, I think that was Yeoman's great gift. It was that he was saying, look, it doesn't matter. Even if you've got the most tired, run-down subsoil known to man, you can do something about it, which I think is incredibly liberating, and gives you a great amount. And I've done it so many times, it's not funny. Taken absolute shit, sodic, horrible bits of ground, applied different treatments to it, and I've got 20, 30, 40 centimetres of actual topsoil in, a matter of years, which I think is quite profound and remarkable. So you can team up with, like people say, team up with microbes. You can certainly team up with particular vegetation communities to direct that soil down a pathway that will meet that will suit the needs of the ultimate crop that you're looking to grow.
And by doing so, you're not setting yourself up for recurring inputs in terms of calcium, magnesium. These are sort of once-off amendments, so to speak.
Oh, absolutely. And we had I think it was a great podcast I did with I think it's great with Bruce Davison, who was in the workplace, and he's a really cool holistic manager who's got a penchant for soils down in southeast, on the south coast of New South Wales. He's a farmer, and he follows the Albrecht method.
Yeah.
But he talked about that as well, because I said, I stepped away from doing a lot of soil amendments because I just started to see that they were a bit chiropractic in their business model.
Yeah. I have a mother who's a physio, so I know exactly what you mean when you refer to chiropractors. Well,
yeah, look, I go to a chiropractor down the corner here, Tim, and he's great, but he's great because he doesn't, and I shouldn't diss them, but, it's sort of that dependency model.
Yeah.
And I've been to a few physios who I would say the same. So, but anyway, there's a bit of that in the whole soils game, because it's obviously the business model and the philosophy is built around a particular worldview and an orthodoxy. But I challenged Bruce on that, and he said, no. What you've got to do is you've got to get the minerals available. You've got to kickstart the system with particular minerals and elements, and then once you do that, then the biology takes over. And this is a bit different to what people like Elaine Ingham say, which is where, you got to get all the biology going and you don't have to worry about the minerals. I mean, that's more or less Elaine's message, and that's okay to an extent, but you got to be in pretty peculiar climate zones for that to work. Like you've got to be in I would say, in non-brittle environments for that to work. But when you're in a semi-brittle to brittle environment, which a lot of Australia is, then you've got this lack of reliability in humidity regimes, and that makes it really difficult for biology to be sustainable. Well, not so much sustainable, for it to sustain its own production. And so other methods come in. I think that doing a bit of mineral amendment and then sort of switch and doing it as something that's quite structural, and then shifting over to you're starting with development, which is what we're talking about here, and then you're shifting over to management.
Yeah.
And that should be particularly possible in a tree crop environment, because ultimately what you're exporting is a pretty small amount of mineral in terms of the nut. And if you're doing it properly and processing on site and whatnot, you're basically just cycling carbon.
Yeah.
Because that's the gift and the genius of trees, is that, especially fruit trees, is that what they're producing is just the direction of carbon. Just like they direct carbon into leaves, they direct carbon into root exudates and whatnot. They also direct carbon into carbohydrates and other products as fruit. It's brilliant as a scheme, as a metabolic scheme. So I think that'll keep you in good stead. Yeah.
Yep. Good one. Thanks for that, mate.
No worries. Well, thank you. I've taken on a bit of Billy Bragg rave this morning. All right. Anything else to go with your end, mate? You're otherwise pretty good with where you are with the program and whatnot.
Yeah, we're getting closer on the holistic context. I've made it's a fairly large document now.
Yeah, yeah,
Helen sat down and did a bit on her end, and I think most of what we sort of did it separately.
Yeah.
And I guess mine is a lot more farm focused and probably more detailed, and hers is more life focused in general.
Yep. That's great.
On the farm.
Yep.
But I think most of what she's written is sort of encompassed by mine, or vice versa. So there's a lot of overlap. So I just got to been away for 4 days, so it makes it tough trying to work on something together.
Oh yeah, no, that's okay. Everyone's at different stages.
It's getting there. Hopefully we don't. Hopefully we'll get it in before the end of the rec, so we can still get feedback on it. But
you'll get.
I
feedback.
imagine it'll be in the next week or so.
Yeah, no, you'll still get feedback. That's okay.
Yeah.
Just as an aside, I had an interesting chat which I shared some of a couple of days ago with a guy called Zach Bush, who runs this. He's a medical doctor in Virginia, and I made a bit of a reference to him the other day. Anyway, he's invited us to work with him on something, and his advice with people is to which was interesting from this context, was to so when he's working with people as a holistic doctor, a medical doctor who practices holistic medicine, he has people live on try and explain things through the lens of 3 headings: live, work, and play. So he tries to get you to look at each of those 3 headings, if you like, which I thought was pretty cool, because I've kind of been looking around going, how can we simplify this a bit more? So how's it not so wordy? How does it fit a bit more with the average person? Because sometimes I get the sense that people look at it and go, oh, this is a bit wishy-washy, or, whatever. It's not.
This is the quality of life statements and that sort of thing.
Yeah, all of that stuff, Yeah. As opposed to, I liked his headings in that, all right, what are you doing about living? And that's the health stuff, all of that sort of thing. So your bodily health, your physiological and mental health, but particularly your physiological health. What are you doing about work? Because work is something that humans do, and it's a really strong. It's a big part of our self-expression, and it also pays for us. So there's that. And then what are you doing about play? And that's an interesting thing in the holistic context. The holistic context, from my perspective, because it is so self-determinist, it doesn't actually say that you should do anything. It basically says, what do you want? Quality of life. How are you going to make it happen? And what's the residue of it? They're the sort of 3 the 3 basic questions. Whereas what Zach's saying is, all right, what are you doing to keep yourself alive? And, right, what are you doing to work, which is, you might say, the forms of production part. But then what are you doing to play? And that's, for you and I, a bit of work in the shop, or, going to watch a concert, or, go and have a kick with the kids, or whatever it is. So there isn't that in there, and whereas he's actually built it into his platform, which I think is really interesting. So it sort of takes away the possibility that you can't play, because it's there as a heading, which is an interesting one. And I'm sort of thinking now, how can I fuse that in somehow? Anyway, but that goes into what you're going through with both of you. In that, sorry, what's your wife's name?
Helen.
Yeah. What Helen's holistic context. Not being a part of this program, not listening to all the stuff that we're talking about, and also, given her situation, her holistic context is going to have points in it which are going to be very, very different to yours. She's almost the control in this, in a sense.
We're trying to nail it down so we can have something that maybe we can put up on the wall that's reflective. That we can both refer to on a daily basis and go, well, and really to help with decision making.
Yeah, well, that was something that a few people did with Javin. they went through this very intense period of refinement and got something that they put on their fridge.
Yeah.
And then even when people came over, they went, "Wow, you guys are amazing! You know, look what you've got." You know, it really summed people up.
Yeah.
And was something that I think I spoke to Julie Gann about this week. You know, because she did a really nice job with her holistic context, and I said, "Wow, with what you're doing, this would be really good to give to your customers." You know, or bits of it, because it really does say what you're about, who you are as an individual, but also as a family and as an enterprise. And I thought, yeah, it's something you can do. Anyway.
Well, once it's condensed down, it becomes part of the story that you tell about your property and your product. You know, and when you're direct marketing, that's a big thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Part of the story is, you know, it's a lot of the thing that I've found.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Trying to find that point of difference, which is always fun. Yeah.
Good one.
Do you know? Just on that, have you seen this book?
Marketing warfare.
Not the sort of one that when you go past it, it sort of jumps out at you because it's aggressively titled. But
there's two that I've read. There's one, The Lean Startup.
Yep.
And another one called Business Model Canvas.
Yep. Both of those are really good. Yeah.
Visual system for doing it, and we're looking into the niche scheme.
Yeah.
Probably to sign up for next year. So I think that'll give us a good kick up, or give me a good kick up the butt to make this a financial enterprise as opposed to a sort of running around just trying to keep my hand on top of things and make a little bit of money on the side, which is what it is at the moment. So I think that'll be a great thing for us, combined with the rest and getting into that next year.
Yeah, no, there's all sorts of modalities which are out there to use and references. Perfect. All right. Well, thanks, mate. Enjoy your day, and we'll probably, with just to close the initial thread. If you want to expand on things a bit more, we'll then perhaps bring them into the workplace, and we'll bring it into the soils or forestry section if you want to talk more about this keyline plant, because it's always a topic that people want to talk about. So you'll get,
I think your answer is pretty on the money for what I was thinking anyway, in terms of our context. It's a no-brainer, and just working out how to do it. We're quite small scale, so we're probably not going to need 100 and something horsepower and 7 times.
No.
I can do it with a pretty simple rig, with what I've got with a few.
How many horsepower have you got?
No, I've got 38 horsepower and 4-wheel drive.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, you should be able to, if your soil's not too tight, you should be able to go with 2 tines or something like that.
Yeah, I thought like 1 tine would be a no-brainer. 2 tines might be a bit of a push.
You'd be surprised.
I've got a toolbar and I can build the tines out of plate. And,
all right.
I've built 1 foot already that I've used for ripping lines for planting trees.
Have a look at our design that
farm hack one.
Yeah, have you seen that one?
Yeah. I've had a look at that. That makes sense. I actually made a keyline boot about a year back out of a old Matic head.
Well, you can. I'll tell you what. I know a few other people got their hands up now. I'll tell you what. If I was you and you had the capability, the thing that makes a keyline plough particularly useful and unique as an implement is actually the foot. It's the point. Yeah. The wombat point, as it used to be known as. Yeah. So if you can make it, if it's cheap for you to make a shank, then make a shank that will fit onto.
Yeah, right.
And if you do that, then you can buy the points. They're $50. They're $50. They're not expensive.
Yeah.
And you buy the point, put that on there, then you've effectively got the working, the thing that makes it work. It's a really nice piece of engineering for a whole, which I won't go into now, but it's very, very well designed, as distinct from all of the other points on subsoilers that are out there. So, yeah, I would do that. And I think that Frank Chevalier's shank design and breakout design shear pin design. Well, it's a shear pinless breakout system. Is unbelievable genius. It is unbelievably good to see that. I can't express that enough. It's really, really clever. Frank's a really smart farm mechanic, an engineer, if you like. He's a farmer who's got very, very high skills in the shed. And his breakout system is absolute ingenious. And it's biomimicry, which is it mimics you hyperextending your arm and then putting it back into place. or you dislocating something. It's a dislocation.
Thinking about it this time in the morning, but
yeah, no, I know. I sort of shut up. Every time I see this thing, I go, "Oh," because I have had dislocations in football and stuff, and it's like, "Oh no!" But yeah, it's really effective. Anyway, thanks so much, Ben. Always good to talk, mate.
Thanks, Darren.
No worries. All right. Next, we have Samantha and Ray. Good morning. And the granite belt.
Good morning, Darren.
Where if you use a keyline plough, you watch it become a soil amendment as your soil, as your soils grind everything away.
Exactly right. You watch metal become soil before your very eyes. So, our question is around keyline geometry in granite soils with the lumpy porridge pot topography.
Yep.
This is something I've battled with ages, as I've mentioned when you were here. How do we make it work in our granite soils, in our granite topography?
What application of the geometry are we talking?
Potentially tree planting.
Yeah, right. You've got I think when you've got because the bigger picture that we've got here, and this is where it gets a bit funky, the bigger picture in terms of influence for your soils is, well, again, you're in an area which I would classify as right on the edge of non-brittle.
Yeah.
And if you average things out, probably just a little bit non-brittle, might be 4.5 if you like.
That's about my thought.
Yeah, well, certainly when you have rest there, biodiversity increases. So if you use that as a determinant, then you're certainly non-brittle, and you can grow. And blackberries grow. I look at blackberries as being a really good arbiter of a place as to whether it's brittle or non-brittle. Because that's suggesting, well, when you get blackberries, it increases biodiversity in the soil, and then ultimately you get floristic biodiversity in the development of a mixed species forest, which is the next succession after blackberry, if farmers let the blackberry do its thing. So,
if our council would let us.
Well, yes. Anyway, let's not go there, but the point being is that your soils again, sort of similar to Ben, they want to be forests. And so because they're forest soils, they're inherently shallow. They're typically, often with the absence of forest on top of them, become poorly drained because you don't have these 50-metre tall organisms which are, as Bill Mollison said, non-mechanical pumps.
Yeah.
Getting rid of all of that water, which now you've got these lowly pastures growing on, just don't have the transpiration power.
Yeah.
Therefore, you've probably got to be a little bit more acute with your patterning. It depends on the trees too. Like we've got a lot of granites around here, and when I was doing a lot of olive tree planting back in the late 90s or mid to late 90s in particular, I found myself on some of our granites actually going perpendicular to the contour, not actually, and not even doing keyline per se.
Yeah.
Well, keyline in the true sense is a program about controlling water, and sometimes you've got to control the fact that you've got too much. and that there's inherent factors at play which just have you go, oh, look, I'm going to put that keyline patterning stuff to one side. Yeah. I'm just going to get rid of this water because I've got so much of it. And in the case of us here in central Victoria, where we get winter dominant rainfall and you're harvesting olives in winter, you're on granite soils. Yeah, right.
Good luck. Spewy, yeah.
Yeah, good luck with that. So what we did there, and this was actually successful, because we've planted a lot of olives on a lot of granites, is going with a more acute, either a more acute keyline pattern. And what I mean by that is having the initial, I'll just show you here. This is probably an example. I'll get this up on the screen here. I just did a keyline pattern on this project here yesterday, or the day before yesterday. So can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a pretty, I wouldn't say that's an acute pattern, but it's, so what I've done here is the usual, and you can see the sort of lumpiness of it because this is LiDAR data, I think. This is in Menorca. So this is here, just to give you an indication of where we are in the world. One of those little points on the map. Okay.
Yep.
So we're there.
The coast of Valencia.
Yeah. So the Balearics, the beautiful island of Minorca. Yep. Anyway, so what you do with keyline, if you're working on a ridge, is you find a ridge line which is on the lowest part of that particular slope. So I did this in this particular parcel. So if in the context of the property, there's the property boundary. So, and I saw this area, and we were looking at opening it up for a sort of a wide-spaced agroforestry system. So this is my concept for that. Anyway, so what I did was I came to the longest contour, which is this one. Now these contours are 1 meter apart, and, and you can see here how I created what I would call a keyline guideline, which sort of, it doesn't sit on the contour, but it sort of just exaggerates a little bit. So what you've done here, because we've got a bit of a valley here, we've got a little valley, and then it goes onto another ridge, which I'd say is artificial because this actually used to be a fort. These are all battlements.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This
thousands of years ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So when the Mediterranean had topsoil.
Oh no! This is more recent. This is when Spain was fighting against Britain and all that sort of fun stuff. So it's not that recent. Not that ancient. Anyway, so my clients have bought this property, and so what I did here was I just created a line which fell from the little valley that we've got here. So it fell from there, and then fell across the contour so that it was a bit lower on this point of the contour, and then rose again. So you can see, if you follow this line, if you follow it from, and sorry, Jason Patterson made this point the other day, which I should take heed of. So I'll just use this place marker. So that point there on the, let's get rid of the text. That point there is, if these lines are say that's 10 meters, 11 meters, and 12 meters, it started at 12 meters, and then by the time it comes down to here, it's at 11.
Yep.
And then by the time it goes back up to here, it's back to 12 again, right? Whereas that's a contour wiggling its way through there, right? So what we've done is we've made a line, a guideline, which we're going to then run parallel to, which is the keyline geometry thing, to that actually already exaggerates a fall to the center line of the ridge, okay? Which is basically what you're trying to do in keyline, right? Or keyline geometry. You're trying to create a fall from valley towards ridge. Yep. And then the way we do it, as opposed to some people who bastardize the concept, is that we have equidistance between each of the lines, except in the where you've got to change in direction, because that's geometrically very difficult to do, particularly when you're dealing with curves. But that's a whole nother matter. Anyway, so I would think for your situation, you might want to have a bit of a play with that. And just create. Now, it's hard with the software that you've got. What I would refer you to, Harry Green wrote a post. Let's just have a look at that for a minute. Harry Green wrote a post in the workplace.
In geography?
I think so. Just give me a moment and I'll just search for Harry. Harry's I was just talking about Harry the other day. He's a great guy. Really proud of what Harry's done with his mates. Let's just see what Harry's got up to. So Harry's developed a few methods using Google Earth to... Where are we? I might even have to tag him just to find it, because I don't know whether I might actually try. I might try keyline pattern cultivation. Actually, keyline. I'll try keyline geometry. Because Harry developed a method, an ingenious method in Google Earth of doing keyline geometry. It's really up to then I didn't even bother because it was just too hard to do. But he developed a method which I thought was really clever. Might have to dig that one out. So I'll make a note about that and find it and tag you in that post, because if you don't have, and I'm guessing you don't have access to other software.
Not at this stage, no.
Yeah. So, and it's really hard. Like, I use a program called Map Info, which I'll just give you a little. Well, so here's what I did, right? So, I use a program called Map Info, which is like a multi-$1,000 bugger off with you. A multi-$1,000 program. And what you can do with this is it's got what's called a parallel offset function. Oh, go away. So, no, won't let me do it for some stupid bloody reason. Anyway, what you can do is you can click on one of these lines, and then you can, it will then, and select the line and then have it so that it will be X amount of meters apart, and it will be completely parallel with the original, with the shape of the original.
Yeah.
And because of that, I mean, that's what I use here. And then when I do that work in Map Info, because I've used it for so many years, I then export this out of here and then go, I'm going to get out of here because that's driving me nuts. I export it from here directly into Google Earth and do it there. Because whilst Harry's method is good, it's not as easy for me as what I've already been doing, because I've already got the software. So yeah, we'll have a look at that. I'll just take a note.
The other thing on what you were saying before about, just parking the keyline geometry on the side, a lot of our country really doesn't run water at all.
But it gets wet.
It gets wet, all right. Yeah.
Well, that's right. So it's got an underlying hydrology, which is not a runoff system, which is part of what we were talking about, I think, when we were looking at that dam of yours. I was saying, well, look, there's bloody rushes everywhere. That should give you an indication that there's water here somehow. It may not be running across the top, but it's, I reckon, and you'd probably find that if you went and built that dam, you may even find water moving underground because of that.
Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. But yeah, you might, it's going to be, because the thing is with the feedback timeline on tree crops is not short in terms of, if you pick a particular orientation and gradient on a line, it's going to take some time before you find out whether you did whether it was optimal or not. And, it's not like you're a research farm, although sometimes you might feel that way.
My wife certainly feels that way.
But you know what I'm saying? It's sort of like you've got to pick a line and you've sort of got to commit to it a bit.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit of, you might say 6 of one and half a dozen of the other sometimes, where you might look around at the effects that other people have got, especially if you've got any organic farmers around you who are doing things like not using Roundup, maintaining vegetation cover, all of those sorts of things. If you've got any other farmers around who are on similar soil types and are doing those sorts of things, then you might want to talk with them and check in with them on what the responses are, in terms of, just how that place behaves, and have a look on Google Earth at their row orientations, as they reflect on their contour, on their topography.
It seems that, most of them seem to either be oriented to get rid of water or oriented for long row lengths in a kind of landscape where sometimes if you orient them in what would be an optimal way for keyline, you've only got 30 meters of row, and then you lose half of your paddock to a headland.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah, it's a tough one. I've, as someone who's done a lot of forestry and orchard, olive grove design over the years, I find this a fascinating topic, but it's one where you sort of have to commit to a line. It's So, but my experience in granites, at the very least, is that when you have tricky underground sort of when you have typical tricky internal drainage characteristics, then you're probably better to go with something that's a bit more acute.
More acute, yeah. Okay. So running more aggressively towards the ridge.
Yes, or just going north-south, because that's the other tension here is trying to get the right amount of light, and are you trying to grow anything in between? So that's the other tension in this.
Yeah.
I've got some good stuff that we've already written for the forestry chapter of the handbook, which is all around this, and obviously that's not out yet, but it's certainly a topic that I find really, really interesting, and it's a difficult one to come down on. If I had, like, it's the sort of thing where modelling would really, really help. Like we need some, and there may well already be this, but a sort of a model where you could, like a hydrological model, where you could, put in a tree system on a particular orientation, change the soil factors, so that you improve their internal drainage characteristics. So, for example, say you grew cover crops in between, and they were composed of particular vegetation communities, and then you went to tall grazed perennial pastures in between your orchard plants or orchard trees, and you put that into the model, and then the model should be able to then, based on your soil type and the infiltration rates that it understands it would have and so on, it should be able to tell you whether, that if I had this much rain over this period, then how that would behave right at that point, and whether it was trafficable, for example, like whether you could get onto it, or whether it was going to have, send up some red flags as far as being too poorly drained for that particular tree species that you're trying to cultivate. So that would be really interesting to me. But as far as I know, that doesn't exist. Although if you paid Georgie enough money, he would certainly develop it.
Yeah, no problem.
Because I know that I know already he has that capability, having played with him.
Yeah, right.
He's an incredible person. Anyway, so I don't know if that's been of any help, but you might have a look. My general advice with these things is have a look around at what other people are doing, unpack that a bit.
Yep.
Reverse engineer the outcomes, and then look at the sites that you have, and then you're going to have to commit one way or another.
Yep.
And also think about solar orientation.
Yep.
And if you are, especially if you're going to integrate something in between.
Yeah.
Which is often what we find ourselves doing because we just can't
try
help
to
it.
do, yeah.
Because we just can't help ourselves, can we?
The one other thing, Darren, I'll be down your neck of the woods next week.
Oh yeah, cool.
Hoping to, if Jason's available, have a look at their place.
Well, have you sent him a note?
I have.
Good.
Great.
Great.
It'll just depend on whether he's busy on Wednesday afternoon, whether or not I'll be able to.
Wednesday afternoon, he usually is because that's when they do deliveries. Obviously it'd be great to have Jason there, but well, he'll tell you whether he can or not. I'll see how I'm going because I've got to go out there too, for various reasons. So I might be able to be there as well. But we'll communicate offline and see what we can do there because it'd be good to catch up and it's a very easy. Like I've taken a number of people there over the years, and because we've built such good access, you can just drive around. It's like driving around a subdivision, but it just happens to be a subdivision for pastured pigs.
Yeah,
which they're really happy about being a part of for the time that they're there.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. So,
is there any other places worth having a look at? Because I've kind of got a few hours Wednesday and Saturday.
Yeah. Okay. Depends on what you want to look at. What are you looking? What do you want to look at?
I'd really love to see the Kiwi Tech sprung fencing in action.
Yeah. Well, that's probably where else have we got that? Who else is using that? Just trying to think. Yeah, well, it's obviously in full expression at you'll see all of that in action at McIver. So there's no drummers there, so you'll get your fix on that there because they've got cattle there at the moment too. So you'll see it in use there.
Okay. Awesome.
They've got cattle, so they've got the permanents all set up with the with the pigs, and then they do temporaries, cross fences with the pigs, and then they've also got some cattle there, which they're mopping up a lot of excess vegetation that they've got at the moment, and they're using Kiwi Tech temporary fencing for that. Just trying to think who else has bloody got Kiwi Tech here. That's I'm trying to think. I can't think of any clients that I've got in this part of the world who could help there. But yeah, you'll get to see all of that at McIver. I think that'll probably be enough. Is there anything else you'd like to see?
That's probably maybe some agroforestry, perhaps.
Yeah, if there's a few bits. Yeah, there's dissected bits here and there. It depends on, because Victoria, even though it's not Queensland, there's still some distances to cover.
Distance between places.
So if you could get down to Rowan Reed's, that would be fantastic. Rowan's on the workplace.
Yeah.
I don't know if he does private visits per se, but you might be able to con him into doing something.
Okay.
He's down at Bamborough, so he would be a good 2.5 hours at least from Jason's. Other really good agroforestry. Yeah, there's just not a lot of it. George Howson's, you could go to his place. He's down near Rowan's as well. He's near Anglesea, near the coast there, south of Geelong. And George has got some pretty cool systems in place. I think there's not many others that I can think of that really jump off the page for me. Maybe make a post in the workplace and tag people like me and Rowan and George. Tag George Howson, me and Rowan Reed, and that'll at least be a starting point in your trip plans.
That'd be great. Thanks, Darren.
Because Rowan will know as much as anyone because he's put so many people through the Master Tree Growers program. So
sweet.
Yeah.
I've just finished reading Heartwood. It's an awesome book.
Oh, isn't it great? That's such a great piece. Yeah, hats off to Rowan. Done a great job. All right, Sam and Ray. You didn't get a word in today, Sam.
Pardon?
You didn't get a word in today.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty normal. It's all right.
Yeah, just get the loud squeaky wheel blokes.
Guilty.
Guilty. All right.
I'm going to let him get his fix somewhere.
Sorry?
I'm going to let him get his fix somewhere.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. All right, back to reality, Ray. See you later, mate.
Cheers.
See you, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's talk to Colin, who's been sitting there patiently up in the Hebrides, I think. I think that's where Colin is. Good morning.
Hello.
Hello, mate. How are you? Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, not bad yourself.
Yeah, good. What a lovely accent you have.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm a bit further afield, I think, than most people on here.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. You're at this time of year, you're probably not getting light until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon either. So. Yeah.
It's I think dark till about 8 and dark at 4. So it's quite a depressing scene right now.
You're right.
You know.
Yeah. Well, that's why you invented whiskey.
Yeah. I think that's why we invent a lot of things. We spend a lot of winter in the shed, you know,
that's
just
right.
conjuring ideas up.
Yeah, winter and poetry, I think, is how whiskey and poetry. Yeah.
yeah. We're actually we're only about 10 miles from where Robert Burns farmed his land.
Wow.
You know, that was in Ayrshire. That was in the same county as us. Friends actually runs the organic dairy down there.
Wow.
They've started actually doing savouries holistic management with our dairy cows. And that's on Robert Burns' land.
Fantastic. Well, Alan would be stoked to know that Robert Burns' estate was doing HM. It's like, do you follow cricket at all?
Oh no, I hate it.
Oh, yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
I'm just motorsports for me. You know, that's my sport.
Well, I was in the car with Alan one day, and I said to him, "Oh, did you know that Sir Donald Bradman's?" Because Alan loves cricket, and I said, "Do you know Sir Donald Bradman does holistic management grazing?" And you should have seen his jaw drop. It was precious. So Robert Burns' estate. You'd be pretty happy with that too, I imagine.
Yeah, I think it's time.
So what can we help you with, mate?
So a lot of the echo and a lot of the stuff with the keyline stuff and the plough, and obviously over here I don't think there's really any people. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 people in England have a plough, you know. So for me it's the same thing.
There's a few other
investment, you know.
There's a company over there called the James Plough, which I came across years ago when I was working a fair bit in the UK. It's called the James Plough, I think it is called. Not James.
I spoke with Keyline. I got a quote from them for pricing, and then I looked at shipping costs and stuff, and they said that years ago they gave the design license to McConnell's.
That's it. Yeah, and they call the McConnell Plough. So
and they basically just copied it.
Yeah, they
after
did.
so long.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
So, but I haven't looked too much into the McConnells because the shanks, and from what I can see, the shanks don't look the same.
No, no, that's what I was going to say. The big thing with I can't find
the important
bit. McConnell.
Yes, either MAC or just MC.
Yeah, there we are. So, the McConnell Plough. They got pipe layers and all sorts of things. I might put McConnell subsoiler. Might bring us up. There we are. Here we are.
I think it's just MC.
Right.
But yeah, they're sent with a painted yellow, you know.
This is the design. So what they did. So the foot, like I said before, to Ben, the big part of the keyline plough, which makes it unique compared with other subsoilers, is the point design, the so-called wombat point. But it's also a lot of subsoilers are. See, most subsoilers which are built, like the ones on the screen that you see here, they're designed for what's called primary tillage, and so they're not designed for pasture innovation per se. Whereas the keyline plough is. So the keyline plough and its derivatives are all designed to have minimum disturbance and are basically aerators. Whereas most subsoilers are actually quite aggressive. So they've got an aggressive angle on their point, and they don't care so much about the shape of the face of the tine either, because they're trying to actually disturb the ground as much as they can to make it easier for the secondary cultivation equipment, such as disc plows and other tine-based equipment, or rotary hoes or power harrows or those sorts of things to come in after. So they're doing the sort of braking work. So
yeah,
so you'll notice
that's what I need there.
Yeah, I was going to say that's why you'll notice the McConnell and the Yeomans have got a knife-shaped, so they've sharpened the face of the shank. And the other thing that they have is that the point is angled. So when the machine is in the ground and the toolbar is level, that's once it's engaged. And what happens then is that the point is actually an angle of about 8 degrees. And at that angle, it's lifting without inverting. So it's breaking the compaction. But what doesn't happen is that you don't get subsoil moving up the face of the shank up and mixing with the topsoil.
Okay.
Right. Now you can change that. We've worked in some soils where where it's sandy on top and clay underneath, and we've changed the angle on the subsoiler on the yeoman's plough, so we do get that effect, but it radically increases the amount of horsepower, because now instead of it running through quite nicely, you've got a point which is on a steeper angle, and so it increases the drag as it runs through. And but I would echo what I said to Ben before. Maybe just depend. I mean, you're running fairly small acreages, so I'd look at the costs involved. Obviously, you would have got a quote, and you would have gone, "Shit."
Yeah, no. I mean, it's like the shipping cost as well is about.
Oh yeah, no, the whole
20%. You know, it's massive. But I noticed from when I got a quote from them, they said, "Oh, you'll be able to run." We get a 50 horsepower Kubota, and they said, "Oh, you'll be able to run 2 tines with that." And immediately I knew it was very different from most others, because all the ones that are made in the UK and the ones you can buy over here, you would only be able to use 1 tine on most of them. And that's because of the angle and the fact that it's on cultivated ground.
Yeah, no, you're right. And no, you're absolutely right.
But even if there's, like you say, and what Ben was saying, if there's a possibility, you know, there's a lot of these kicking about that are really old and a bit knackered, but if the frame's good, you know, you might have the possibility of basically just buying the shanks effectively, you know.
Yeah, no, you can certainly do that. Yeah, the shanks are where it's at. You can either, they're just a 4-inch toolbar. So then the other thing you can do is go to this part of the website, of our website. I'll just pop that in the chat. There's the chat. Chat. Yeah. Just have a look at that in the chat. No worries, Andy. I've got that. So tag Andy. All right. Have a look at this post that we did. So Luke Hallam who's in the workplace. We met this guy Frank Chevalier, who I mentioned before, in France years ago. He came to some of our workshops, and he's a keyliner. And he's a farmer in northern France. And anyway, he followed our work, and we started talking. And he came to one of our workshops with one of his plows. He came with this one, actually, and we went, "Man, this is mad," you know, because what he's done is he's built just in his workshop this ingenious plow, subsoiler, and seeder. And that the drive for the seeder is a bicycle wheel that he's, or part of a bike frame that he's just cut. And then he's made this really great seeder. And the seeder is fantastic because it's based on an But the Atchison
No.
seeder is a really good seeder because it's a mechanical seeder as opposed to an air seeder. But it's a really good. It uses a technology that was first developed in factories where they're like in pill factories, like pharmaceutical pills. And all of these pills are all different shapes and sizes. And so the mechanical engineers developed this foam, polystyrene foam, like a sponge, that spins, and you have a different size aperture. And that aperture going in there, the sponge will handle any size pill. And the speed that the sponge rotates at determines the flow rate. And so Atchison, who are a New Zealand seeder company, they make seeders, they took that same technology and put it in their seeders. And Frank took that same technology and hacked it and built it into his little bicycle-driven, farm-built subsoiler seeder, which he runs on really small tractors. So this is just a little this runs on as you can see back here, a pretty small tractor, like a 35, 40 horsepower tractor. So one of the things we said to Frank was, well, show us your plans. So Frank showed us his plans and we went, oh, okay. That's probably not going to work because, people want to replicate these things. And I said, yeah, look, they're good plans, mate. But yeah. So anyway, I said, look, I put the word out and I said, can anyone help us here? And Luke Hallam, who's in the workplace, he's an industrial engineer and his family's got a steel fabrication place. So Luke came along and did the full CAD plan of it, which was really, really good of Luke. But this design is better than the Yeomans on a number of levels. And if you've got rocks in particular, then because you'll just drive yourself crazy with shear pins if you've got rocks.
Yeah, that's one of my concerns as well.
Yeah.
Is the backside of our property go down to the river was actually used to be like a small quarry,
Yeah.
So at that point, there's some points only 6 inches of soil,
Yeah. No, that's what I thought. So this design, because a lot of Northern Europe is stony because it's glaciated, and your place is no exception. This design here, see how he's got the arm that goes across there? I might just zoom in a bit.
Yeah. It's sprung loaded.
Yeah. So, but see that bolt that's right there. So he's got an arm. So you've got a bit of C section, right? And then he's got a solid piece inside of that C section. So, like I said before, have you ever seen a dislocated joint? What happens with it? Like I dislocated my thumb one day punching somebody. It obviously didn't land very well. It was fun. We were play fighting at high school. Anyway, I had my thumb out, and I went, I looked down at my thumb, and it's back this way some way. And what happened then was I had to then apply force to that to put it back in, and it had this big divot in there. And that's basically, when I saw Frank's thing, I immediately thought of my dislocated thumb, because what that does, you can't quite see that, but that's kind of dislocated right there. And and because of that, it's actually got a force that you have to push it in order for the dislocation to return to its natural shape, which in this case is like this. So that's what your thumb should look like.
Yep.
Right? But when it's dislocated or when it's hyperextended, it goes like that. And when you've got the hyperextension, it's then and it's not a big hyperextension, and that's what that bolt does. So that bolt modulates the hyperextension. It's ingenious. So what happens is if you hit a rock, then that will apply, because the force is going to the point, right? If you hit a rock, then that will knock this out, and the spring will keep the load pulling down, but it's not enough to pull it back down. So what you do to get the shank back in the ground again, you just put it into reverse and back up.
Okay.
And what it does then is that then closes that, and then you lift it up because there's a rock there. It's just going to happen again probably. So you lift up, go over the top of where the rock is, pop it back in the ground, and off you go again.
Yeah, so his nut or his bolt on the top is effectively determining the amount of preload that goes on it.
Exactly.
So that when it hits a rock, there's a certain amount of load it has to take before it throws itself out effectively.
Correct.
Which
Yes.
Really clever.
Yeah, very clever, very clever. So the full design is here. So I would strongly recommend having a close look at this design. And we know already people have made this. And one of our things, see, Frank was working a lot in places like Morocco and Tunisia and Algeria and working with farmers down there. And he was going down there and just doing this sort of making these plows down there out in the field, just going to boneyards of old farm machinery and just getting bits of this and bits of that and basically making these plows with seeders and everything. It was fantastic work. And we said to him, look, we really want to support that better. So let's make some plans that, and cut diagrams and stuff like that so that if people want to do any fabrication, then they've got the exact specs in your absence, because that's the other thing. So, so really cool stuff. So have a look at that if you can. And you might, if you've got any, I don't know how handy you are, but if you've got any mates who are pretty handy.
Well, I'm a mechanical engineer to trade.
Well, you're
when I was at university, we ended up building race cars all the time. So it was just, and
well, this is red, so that helps.
Yes, go faster, stripe on it.
That's right. But no,
that's great. I'll definitely have a look at that.
Yeah, and he's just got a couple, even for the shank, he's just got a couple of bits. I think it's 10 mil plate, mild steel plate. So there's all of that stuff. I mean, you can see, you know enough, you can see that and you can go, oh yeah, that's pretty straightforward. And it's not using, see, Yeoman's, they use really, like their alloy, everything's been engineered. All of the alloys have been engineered. The frame has been heavily engineered and stuff. And you might say that's a bit unnecessary, ultimately. Whereas this is just steel that more or less anyone can go and get, off in a scrap yard or at a shop.
Well, if you can make it cheap enough, you don't feel so bad if it breaks.
No, that's right.
You can make it cheap enough again, with slightly modified one for your mistakes.
Yeah. But I do think as well, the addition of a seeder is a really good strategy because it just increases the value of the whole program. Yeah. Absolutely. So what else did you have, mate? The
only other thing was that I only joined on Sunday, so I'm kind of behind the times in terms of this.
Yeah, that's all right.
The other point was where we are here. There's a big part of the land's very, very gradually sloping and kind of undulating, and then there's like drop-off bits going down to the riverside. But I might have the chance to hire out an RTK GPS.
Oh yeah, cheap. Cool. Yeah.
And it was just looking at the kind of, for 16 acres, what kind of ground control point spacing would you recommend?
Well, if you want to go down that pathway, are you going to put a drone over the top of it?
Yeah, well, my sister's got a Mavic 1 Pro,
nice.
So
sweet.
I was going to. I've got the kind of map, the outline done to load up onto the.
Well, you just got to find a day that's clear. Well, a day where there's
that's the biggest thing.
And no wind.
Tomorrow it's to be 70 mile. Tomorrow's to be 70 mile an hour gusts. So I've been out in the orchard, kind of making sure the trees are well staked.
That's not drone weather. No, you'd be. But yeah, I would probably.
I was thinking half-meter contours, like
in
some places
the GCP. The GCPs, they usually say that you've got to have a minimum of, I think it's 8 in 5 acres. Just bear with me for a minute. Actually, I've got it in just hang on a minute. I'll just find the page. Was it drone deploy? I do have it written in one of my books. When I do my GCPs, I do them at 160 metre spacings. but you've got to have a minimum number. I think it's, I can't remember whether it's 5 or 8. I think it might be 8 on 5 acres or 8 on 10 acres or something like that, which is what, 8 on 4 hectares, thereabouts.
Yeah.
Just bear with me. GCP. Capturing ground.
So see when you're using the RTK points that you would take.
Yep.
Are you marking every point as a ground control point, or?
Yeah, what you do. Well, so what I would do, and we can help you with even setting this up as part of our service with you. If you send onto the workplace, and you might do this in the geography section, so get out of the Recs sort of sections and go to the number 2 geography page of the workplace, either there or go to Regrarian's mapping, because that's a bit more specific. Yes. So go there and just post up your KMZ or KML of your boundary. And just preface it with saying, "Oh, this is what I'm looking to do," and then and tag me. Anyway, what I'll then describe to you is that some of the things that you'll be looking to do is use your RTK, mark out your crosses or points. But I just wanted to find you the spacing. Here we go. So. Drone deploy requires a minimum of 4 GCPs, and we suggest using 8 GCPs for maps of up to 50 acres. All right, so that's what's important to read. And then for over that, 1 checkpoint for every 10 additional acres. So I did a grid. I worked that out on the basis of a grid, and it worked out to be about 160, 170 meters on a grid if you were going to put 8 GCPs on an area of that about 20 hectares, and then I did the same for what. So and then I checked in with Drone Deploy and I said, would this work? And they said, yep, no worries. So for you though, it doesn't matter if you add more, because all the ground control points do is just create a stronger base for the photogrammetric software to do its thing. The big thing that you'll have to remember though is to be well inside of the boundary. That's something that's quite important. So you've got to be 50 feet, which is I think around 15 meters inside of the boundary of your map, also of your flight area. So I just say 20 meters because that for me is easier to remember. So what I do is I'll then put a grid over the top of my map in Google Earth or whatever. And then I'll plot out the points of where I've got the GCPs going to go, and then I upload those GCPs into my phone or into I use a program called GPS Kit, and then I use that to navigate. So when I'm doing the RTK, I'll use that to navigate the grid and where I'm actually going to plot the GCPs. And I found that white, I made a point about this the other day, overall in all of the ground conditions I've worked, the white colour, white paint colour is by far the best. It's either going to be paint or you might, if you don't want to use paint, then you might want to make up some discs of various, like here they've got a disposable idea here is making cardboard cakes, as you can see here. These... Oh, gee. Oh, no, you can buy them. How ridiculous. Okay. You can. So
in that then, because I'm not overly familiar with like the RTK GPS and whatnot, the problem I have here is that the contour maps are okay. We downloaded, there's a company in the UK called Map Centre, and you can get your kind of ordnance survey maps, and they provided a half-metre contour map, but some areas it just kind of starts going a bit funny, so you can't really trust it, and I don't know when.
That's important. If you're going to use the map for controlling water and all of that sort of stuff, which I'm gathering you are, then you need something that's pretty legit. And if you start to not trust it, then you wonder what part of it to trust.
Yeah, exactly. Because some drop-offs are like really steep. You know, you couldn't drive a tractor down them or anything like that going down to the riverside. So, you know, a half-meter contour gets very, very close to each other.
Yeah.
So I was wanting to kind of use like the RTK to get an accurate contour mapping.
Yeah.
But are ground control points different to the points you would? Because I take it for doing half-meter intervals, you need to take a lot of points.
Yeah, well,
You know, how does
if you,
I feel like there's something in my head that's not connected. You know.
yeah, have you read the Gregorian's Handbook or had a look through that at all?
I've read through the first chapter and I've just gone to the second one.
Yeah, we'll
and
go
only
to.
that I saw.
I'll just find the section for you in there. Just hang on a minute. I'm really grateful. I did a print the other day, so I've got the 3 chapters on my desk, and I'm finally getting to where I want to get. Well, on the way to where I want to get to, which was I created this for myself, so I could just go, oh, where's that? Flick, flick, flick. Oh, there it is. Right. So, it's a selfish piece, you might say. Now, there's a section 2.27 in chapter 2 called Total Station RTK Survey. And it describes how to do a proper, you know, this is not a photogrammetric survey. This is where you're using an RTK or a total station to actually do a proper topographic map. All right.
Okay.
Now, I had a surveyor work for me for years full time back in the 90s. So I understand a lot about surveying as a result of that relationship. And he was a mining surveyor before he came and worked with us, and so miners are particularly interested in the shape of land because half the time they're always dealing with cut and fill, right? And they're always dealing with volume, so they really want to know what the shape of the land is for their sinister purposes, and of keeping the world's state of play supplied. So what he would do is when he would do a survey for us, because we were doing a lot of cut and fill and we were doing a lot of keyline stuff, which is all based on land shape, is he would do what I would call a top and toe survey. So I'll just get up that on the screen here so people can see what I'm talking about. RHB. Where's handbook? Amalgamated. Yeah. That one. Shit, I didn't want to go there. Hang on, pardon me for a moment. I'll just get that up in a different app. Preview, that's better. All right, so we go to, what was it? 132. So 2.27. Oh, there it is. There. Yeah, that's it there. Now, you'll notice here, I haven't got the contour map on here, but there's probably additional drawings I really need to put in this to explain it properly. So see how you've got a valley, for example, and then you've got ridges. Now, everything's more or less the same. When you look at a slope, or if you look at a cross section of a landscape if you look at a landscape in cross section, what you'll see is that it more or less, if you break it down, it kind of looks like this. If you take the curvature out, it sort of looks like this. And what you've got within that, and just to tie into this map, is you've got these tops and toes all through it, and center lines. Okay. Now, what Conrad, our old surveyor, would do is he would go along and he would survey those tops and toes because they broke the landscape down. And so then when the software took that data, took those X, Y, Z points, those longitude, latitude, altitude points, and then turned that into a contour map, it actually reflected the land shape really well and gave you a very good volume measure of the place. Now, if you're looking at doing this is where ground control points are different, because ground control points, see, photogrammetry is a very different process, and in some ways it's more accurate in terms of the total landscape, because this is what we're looking at here is what we're talking about. It's called this creates an interpolated contour map.
Yep.
Okay? Ditto with this other method that people use. Oops, I'll just get rid of that. This other method that we've used and others have used here, which is, this shows Farming IT, who we've used for years. They have an RTK on their motorbike, on their quad bike, and they whiz across the property at different intervals. So these intervals might be, these paths might be at 15 to 40 meters of spacing, depending on the detail required. And as it's running along, it's creating a snail trail of points of X, Y, Zs, right? And then again, because of the sheer volume of points and the distance apart, it kind of almost creates a photogrammetric effect just because of the sheer number of points. Whereas here, when you're doing it using this method, you're not taking anywhere near the number of points. And so you don't. So if you've, so if there's a little dip here or a little rise, you've probably missed it. And the contour map that is produced will miss it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If that makes sense.
So you're just looking at the kind of standout features, if you like.
Yes.
The kind of standout highs and lows, and allowing it to kind of, like you say, interpolate and knit together.
Yes.
So it's all about getting it accurate enough, effectively, without having to go every meter and literally stab it, take a point. And,
yeah, that's why I think ultimately photogrammetry is really good, because with ground control points, because you can get the best of both worlds in a sense, because you can get your ground truthing from your evenly distributed ground control points, and then you get the full. I mean, you look at the mechanics or the ultimate outcome of a photogrammetric survey, and the only survey that's really any better, I think, from a whole range of, that covers the whole landscape better is LiDAR. But then, go and find a $1,000 drone that'll do LiDAR. It'll happen, I'm sure, but not now. So
it's not there yet.
Yeah. So because LiDAR, sends out 150 to 200 or 300,000 laser points or light points a second.
It's a big 3D scanner, isn't it?
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, so very different. So yeah, it's a good conversation to have, Colin. I think a lot of people would have found some use in understanding the mechanics of how this stuff works.
I'll post up about it on the.
So I think
the planner or the geography.
One of the things that you might want to do too, just to test the plan, just to test things, is actually mark out some actual contours on your place.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And on a small scale site like you've got, that's not going to be hard. And so you might go and mark some contours out while you're doing the RTK survey, or use a laser level or something else that you've got around. Mark those out and give them a different number, so that data that comes from that is not exported, but it's visual. And then what you can do is, when you do the analysis of the map, because at the 16 or 18 acres, if I remember correctly?
16, yeah.
Yeah, so you'll be able to fly at a relatively low altitude. I think you should be able to get 30 to 40 meters if you haven't got too much relief change.
There's not, and there's not many trees either.
So I'd go lower altitude. Then you'll get better resolution, and you'll be able to see those points where you did the contours. And then when you get your GCP map processed, you can then you'll then join the dots on those contours that you've generated, and you can sort of test the topo then, and test it against the other data that you had done as well, or that you got from the Ordnance Survey.
So No, that's great. Thanks
Yeah,
very much.
so, yeah, no worries, man. Well, good luck and welcome to our little space, and look forward to helping you out, mate.
Yep, thanks very much.
No worries. All right, Thomas, allowed to talk. Here we go. I was waiting patiently. Thank you. Just another sip of tea. Good morning, Thomas.
Morning.
How are you, mate?
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Good.
What's going on?
All right. My question is about LiDAR.
Yes.
So the whole state of Indiana has a LiDAR database,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's 1.5 foot.
Yep.
So I guess the trouble I'm having is you can go on this site called Open Topography and get a raster image of it. How do I then take that and put contour lines onto it?
Well, the raster will probably be a digital elevation model, a raster of a digital elevation model. It's what would be curious to me, and I'd hope this would be the case, is that that's vectorized. What that means is that the map actually has that it's been tied into some geographic coordinates. It's put on its place on Earth. Otherwise, it's just an image, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I find that surprising because the GIS freaks who put all of this stuff together, they should know better. They should know that, you know, if you just take a, well, I'd love to. If you got it, can you go onto Regrarian's mapping onto that group and do a screenshot of what you're seeing, and then Georgie and myself, particularly Georgie, will be able to unpack that and go, right, that's what it looks like, and maybe a link, and Georgie will be able to help you pull that together, one way or another, or give you the questions to go back to this authority or whatever the service, and say, oh, look, this is what I need, can you give me this, please? It should be pretty.
Yeah, it's a little overwhelming, the choices that they give you.
Yeah, true. Yeah, well, it's all jargonized.
And the file types are kind of hard to figure out.
Yeah,
like LAS, I don't think opens in.
Yeah, I know. We can open LASs. Yeah, it's like, again, it's like.
Oh, you can.
Yeah. Look, good. Georgie can open anything. I'm not going to go there. He has capacities that most of us don't even.
In Google Earth, LAS.
No.
Directly, or you have to convert it or something.
So what we do for you is we provide a conduit between these people who live in a world where they think everyone else is like them. And everyone who goes onto their state-based site understands what an LAS is, and that have got the capacity to open it and then translate it and then turn it into what they want it. You know, most people just, like you, all I want is a contour map. Can you give me a bloody contour map? No. We're going to make it hard because we're GIS freaks and we just live in our little echo chamber of where everyone else, of course. Well, you must be an idiot if you don't know what an LAS is or how to open it. How come you haven't got our $20,000 software? Right, yeah, sure. So, no, that's part of our job, is to break that down for you. So use us up for what we're worth. And send us the data, like I've send a couple of screenshots, send a link, explain your story in Regrarian's mapping, and we'll deal with it for you. It should be pretty straightforward.
Awesome.
At the very least, what we'll do is we'll put you on a pathway to getting what you ultimately want, which they can, this is the thing that drives me insane, is that all of these people, all of these organizations have the power, have the capacity, have the know-how to make it so that we don't have to do this shit for you, right? It's really...
Sure.
It's dumb.
Actually, I went to the county extension office. He wasn't even aware of this data set.
No. Well,
and there's LiDAR for the whole state.
Yeah, no, look, unless you're using it, because you got to think, remember, people are partitioned into disciplines, and if this is not their gig, well then, yeah. Anyway.
Well, he was the GIS guy for the county.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, he missed that memo. Yeah. He missed the make my county great again memo. Yeah. All right. Anything else I can help you with, Thomas?
Right, thanks.
Everything else
That's
good?
all today.
Yep, you've
It's progressing pretty good
kicking
here.
along. All right, good work, man. All right, well, I look forward to our next private chat and see how things are going.
All right.
Thanks, mate. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Bloody hell. All right, who else? Oh, Pablo. Pablo, I don't know if I can make you speak now. Can you? Could be falling asleep. Sounds like I've still got the same thing going with Pablo. No, I can't hear him. I can just hear you, and it's like you're at the end of a long corridor speaking into a cup. So, don't know what's going on there. Anyway, I'll have a look at your thing, and I'll do my best to interpret what's going on. So you've sent me a thing in the workplace chat. So here we are. All right, so I'm just going to turn your mic off because, so I've got it. No worries, mate. I've got it on the screen. Yep, sent you the question. So let's have a look. Let's just get this downloaded. Now, this, for those, when we're talking with Colin, we're talking about the particular, here we go, the particular ways that people do surveys. So just to give you the background, Pablo has got a 5-hectare property in Galicia, in southern Galicia, not far from the northern Portuguese border. And he didn't have a contour map of his place. His place is covered in part with what do you call it? Deciduous vegetation, and there's a few open fields. He wants to do some market gardening on the place and that sort of thing. So let's have a look at what it looks like. So before the rec started, Pablo's been on quite a pathway with finding a surveyor who would survey his place at a reasonable cost. And from that, we then said, when he sent through the data to us, we looked at it and we went, oh, right, what are they doing here? Because we could sell we could see that the map wasn't reflecting the territory. And it looks like he sent us a new one through, and this looks like it's a bit better than the first go. So I'm not sure, because I haven't followed the thread. Georgie's been in control of this a bit more, but I wasn't quite sure what. He used this particular Trimble apparatus, which I think is what we call a network GPS, and it may not have had the full accuracy that's involved here. And we also saw that he used interpolation software, or the interpolation process, to generate a topographic map. And for some reason, this surveyor, concentrated some of his points that he took much more highly in some areas and then with low density in others. And so we said to Pablo, well, look, there's whole areas on this property which he hasn't even taken points on. And it was like, you got to do that. That's just surveying 101 for feature surveying. And I say that I'm not a surveyor per se. I haven't gone to university for 5 years. I've just done, I haven't gone to university for 5 minutes, apart from walking past. So they should know better to generate a decent topo for people. Anyway, looking at this, I don't know what process he's gone through. He, or should say she, has gone through in the time since. But it looks a lot better than the first version that was sent through. So I think in terms of marking, we had to go, and so Pablo's written, we had to go at identifying ridges and valleys. The thing is that our place, to our eyes, does not have obvious ridges and valleys. Well, I disagree. Now, it's a small place, so you've got to look at, and this is what I've done with a few people's properties, and I'll just give you a bit of context on that. So, for example, I think he's still here. Jason Patterson's on the call at the moment. So, Jason has kept up with his homework very nicely. Thank you very much. And Georgie, I don't know whether I should open George, because Georgie and I have some pretty lucid conversations, and he's a bit of a different thinker. So I might just blank my screen out for a moment, because God knows what he's got on the other side there. I don't want to. So just give me a moment while I stop sharing, and I'll have a look at Georgie's response here, because he sends me all sorts of stuff. Oh God. Actually, I can show that, because it just gives you some sort of insight. Where are we? Where are we? Share screen. Here we are. So Georgie sent through some maps, some flow maps, and yeah. So I sent through some. Yeah, so what we I'll go to this one, because it's a bit different. So one of the things that it's important sometimes when you get these maps, especially on smaller sites, and I've seen this happen a few times, is actually, I might go to another one that I had there. Pardon me, I'm rambling a little bit. I'll go to open Big Tree. So we've got Big Tree and these two. That's where we want to go. So sometimes you've got to go and actually get data from outside of your site in order to be able to get the context of how your landscape sits. So for example, this is a site in central Victoria where we are, and I'll just open another bit in there. Just bear with me, open. Data, here we are. So we've done this for a few people where, so Pablo, where I'm getting to for you is that you might want to see if from the government you can get additional contour information from outside of your property to help you through with this process. So just bear with me for a minute and I'll get there. So core, geography, GIS data. Big map, there we are. These two map sheets. So I've got a database of maps, as you probably gathered, and one of the ones I've got is this one. So I'm just going to add these to this map. So this is government. These are two government map sheets that I've brought into Google Earth, and of course Jemmy's place, which is this one. Is right on the border of the two maps, hence the two map sheets. So anyway, so you can see here, I'll just turn off. So she had a survey done of her place. Let's turn that off. And by using Farming IT, and they generated an RTK-based survey. And this is the 10-metre contour interval photogrammetric survey from the government, right? So when you put that, so those red lines are those, and then when I put hers back on, which is here, just get rid of some of that because there's a bit of superfluous information there. Geography, land units, contours, no, it's not that one. There's a bit of extra data there that we don't need from. There we go, that's better. So they're they're half meter contours? No, they're 25 centimeter contours, right? Now you can see there's a ridge line running through here, and then you've got all of this zigzaggery, which is not unusual in a forest, that goes through. Now for me, when Jemmy sent through the first iteration of her keyline geography map, it stopped at her boundary, and she wasn't able to get the full context of it, and neither was I to comment. So what I did, because I knew she wouldn't be able to do it necessarily and not quickly, so I just went and found the data that I needed because I had it already. It was easy for me. And I added that. And what I found was that there was an additional primary valley that actually started outside of her property, because this is her property here in the corner. And that she's got a primary valley that comes through her place here. Then she's got another primary valley which starts, she's got two other primary valleys, one of which starts in her property because the main ridge line runs sort of through here. That's that solid, bigger yellow line. And then she's got another one which starts here. So I was able to, from that, develop an understanding of what the primary land units were. Now, Jemmy had, if you see the comments that I wrote to her submission of task work here, she made all of these small little primary land units, and they're actually not primary land units. So they're actually of an order of magnitude higher. And this is the complication that people go through. And if we look at Pablo's for a moment, so we'll go back to his place, which is here. So Pablo is like a 5 hectare segment of a bigger landscape. And so with that and acknowledging that, it would be useful to see how it all fits, because I want to see how much water is running through it. It's probable, for example, that road that's running through there, that might be the top of a ridge, might be a main ridge that's running through. And it's probable, I can see that there looks like there's a valley, and that valley continues right down there. So you would call that probably a primary valley. And it looks to me that that's probably the only primary valley. And it looks like this here is probably a ridge form. And this here is a ridge form. And that's depicted as well in the fact that we can see that this is probably the areas that are in forest, and I can even see there's probably an old terrace line through there. So you've got a bit of a, and the terraces follow a contour alignment and so on. That we've and that this is forested. That this is probably fairly dry, stony hills, and so whereas the areas that are open and cleared are the areas where the soil is deeper and more well watered and whatnot, and that's the valleys. So you add all of these things together, and you can sort of deduce broadly what the patterns are when you sort of spread yourself out and have a bit of a look around. You go, yeah, right, I can see the land use generally here is anywhere it's cleared, like even the valley itself. Why is it? Like on a lot of river valleys, there's a beautiful river running through there. Why isn't it cleared on both sides? Well, probably because the shape of the valley is quite incised and it's running through stony hills. So that tells you a lot about that broader landscape, and that's its shape. And so there's a couple of spots, like there's a spot here. It's not until you get really, so it's running through the hills here, and it's not until you get to just where Pablo's place is that it starts that a floodplain starts to develop. And of course, the village is built on that, and on it goes, and then it closes back up again here, and then it opens back out. So you can sort of look at all of those telltale signs to look at it. So getting you back to your question, Pablo, I would say that you've got a primary ridge line which sort of runs through here. There's a broader curve there. You've got a primary valley which more or less runs through the centre here. Over here, it's a bit harder to tell, but I would broadly, I wouldn't get too worried about it. Your property is pretty small. I think in the context of what you've got going on, it's not such a big deal. It's a bigger deal when you've got a bigger property and you're trying to determine where access will be and all of the rest of it. You don't have as big I don't think you've got as big a concern there. And your job's going to be very easy because I'm going to do it for you right now. Your primary valley is basically through here, right? Primary valley, number one. And your primary ridge that's visible, according to this map, is, just change that line color. is probably through here somewhere, I reckon. Something like that. That's the sort of apex of that curve going through there. So it's water's going this way or water's going that way. So there's probably another little valley. Yeah, there's a little valley formed down through there, which you can see even with the color of the tree. I can see that the tree color through there, and you can see even with the curve of the river right there that there's probably a little point where water drops off just there, and so on. So yeah. So I think that's probably all you got, mate. So you've got a really, really easy job ahead of you if you can memorize those two lines. What we'll worry about beyond that, particularly next week in the water layer and in the access layer to follow in January, is how you sort of pull that together in the forestry layer. So I think the layers that are going to be of interest to you in particular, don't get too hung up about this keyline stuff right now. The application of it for you will be when we do when we look at row orientations and any access and so on, and any stuff that you want to do about water. That's when we'll perhaps look at this a bit more closely, if that makes sense. But yeah, it does look a lot better. Would be good for you, mate, if you can get out there with some sort of level that you can. Yeah, no, that's all good, mate. Don't worry about that. I believe you. So that's what we already marked, but the files got lost in translation. Yeah, just leave it at that. You're off the hook. Take a rest. Go and have a cup of tea. Hug your wife. Play with your kids. Have a walk instead. So yeah, let's just hang back. But what I would like you to see is just go and maybe check the contours. I think it's get out there with a laser level or whatever apparatus you have and just see if these are fairly close. And then if you've got that trust in what you've spent on here, then we'll keep working on it. All right. Fantastic. Thanks for all of your work and enthusiasm, mate. I really appreciate it. So it's great to see people who are enthusiastic about their tasks. Okay. No worries, mate. Any time. All right, we've got any other hands up before we're done? Yeah, that we're a little bit over time, but that's good. All right. Andy, you made a point the other day in a private message, and I've just got that data. I had a couple of weeks, I think, where Isabella had borrowed my desktop, and this desktop computer's got the software on it, which can make the podcast. So I'm a little bit behind on the podcast, but I've just got those other files off my laptop, and so now that I've got the desktop back, I'll be able to process them and get myself back up to date with the podcast. So what some people do in the meantime is they use just play the YouTube or download it and listen to it. A few people have done that, so as an alternative. So your Luddites that you mentioned can do that, mate. Chat. No worries. Thanks, Andy. I appreciate that. I don't know that there's anything else that I recall people pinpointing. So if anyone's got any other questions, give them to us now. Otherwise, we're going to close up shop and get on with our days. Nine? Okay. Well, thank you all very much for joining me today, as you do, and getting me wide awake after just a couple of hours sleep. So, yeah, really appreciate you joining us. It's a real treasure to me to have all of you involved, and I look forward to. Wow, we've got water. So we've got our last week until we have our Christmas break, Christmas New Year break, or whatever else you celebrate, the festive season. And yeah, that's gone really well. And do what you can as far as there's a few of you, maybe still getting your holistic context together. If you want, just park that for Christmas so that you can maybe come back to that over Christmas and maybe get your mapping together to spend next week or the time you've got between now and next week getting a bit more of your mapping together, because we're about to head into a period where we're going to be looking at our maps quite a lot. So yeah, so if you're sort of stuck like Ben and a few others, I wouldn't say stuck, but if you haven't in your task work journey, you're at a point where you're still getting a holistic context together, and you're saying, "Oh, I'm not going to move along." Probably move along, I would say, and get your mapping stuff together. Give yourself a bit of a breather from that as well, from the holistic context stuff, which can be a bit heavy, and play with some maps for a while, and put yourself in a different headspace. Get that together, so you so that when we come into doing, which we will next week, start building layers, you've at least got your mapping half together, and you won't sort of feel like you've fallen completely behind if you haven't already. And I'm saying this because this is the case with most of you. There's only, as far as I can see, there's only 2 or 3 of you out of the 75 or so who are doing this program who are up to date. So some of you are only a week behind. Some of you are effectively 4 weeks behind. So I don't like to use those terms, but be rational about it. I'm guiding you to say, well, pick and choose your fights and pick and choose your processes. So get your mapping, get in the room, and start playing so that we can all work together to get your outcomes. All right, with that, thank you so much for joining me, and look forward to catching you throughout the day. And if I don't talk to you before, have a wonderful weekend with your friends and family, and we'll talk on Monday. Tuesday, I should say, or your Monday. Thanks very much.